Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Wizard101 video. Now I know what you're thinking. A world ranking? Noah, that's very original of you. You've only done this about 6 times, and you're so right. But, you know what I haven't done? A world ranking in 2024. I know, right? It's mind-blowing. If you're wondering why I'm doing this, basically the other day when I was streaming, and by the other day I mean like 3 weeks ago now, someone mentioned my world tier list, I think, and I went and I clicked on the video. And dear God, I had horrible opinions a year ago. I don't know what was wrong with me. I'll throw up the picture of it on screen right now. But Jesus Christ, I had like horrible opinions. If I remember correctly, like Lemuria was an A. Was I on drugs? Like Lemuria is a horrible world by all accounts. And when it came out, I don't even think I enjoyed it. I don't know why I put it in A. There must have been something wrong with me that day. And there were quite a few other worlds as well that I disagreed with. And on top of that, I did recently replay through a lot of these worlds again. So it's kind of fresh in my mind, and my opinions change every time I actually play the game. So I thought I would do it again. The only thing I will say is Arc 3, I'm a little rusty on. I've played Arcs 1, 2, and 4 pretty recently, but my knowledge on those worlds is pretty good, so hopefully my opinions will still be pretty strong. Anyways, enough rambling, but before we get into it, one more thing. Make sure to drop a like, hit the sub button. I know you don't want to hear that. No one wants to hear that. Also hit the join button. It's pretty cheap, and I get a little bit out of it. So I would appreciate if you did that. If not, that's fine. Also, make sure to drop a comment leaving your opinions on this world ranking. I'd like to know your opinions. Beyond just being fun to generate discussion, my opinions aren't the end-all be-all, and I would like to hear what you have to say. Anyways, without further ado, enough rambling, let's get into it. Starting off, we have Wizard City. Now, Wizard City, in my opinion, has gone very much downhill compared to what it used to be. Back in the day, the original Wizard City, I would probably put in a firm A tier, maybe even S, depending on the day. It was so nostalgic, the quest line was just very quick, concise, made sense. There was a little bit of humor tied into it. It was overall just a pleasant experience in general. Nowadays, my opinion has soured quite a bit. If you didn't know, a few years ago, I think it was 3, 4 maybe now, they did a change where they completely remodeled Wizard City. Now, first off, let me preface this by saying the visuals look amazing. New Wizard City looks very, very good. Very, very good. But King Saul didn't decide to stop there. They also decided to change the quest line quite a bit. And let me just say, the new Wizard City questline is just so underwhelming in comparison to the old one. They added so many just random jokes and gags. It almost feels like, you know how Marvel towards the end of their run, like phase 3, kind of just became a quip machine where it wasn't as serious as you want all the time. Everyone was just quipping and there was gags and stuff. It feels like that. It feels like cheap humor that they kind of just threw in there for the laughs of it. Some of it even feels just like lol random humor, you know what I mean? For example, in Cyclops Lane, they added a character called the Great One, which is just a translucent bunny that is controlling everything. And he kind of has this whole like, I'll come back, you'll see, you'll rue the day that you decided to anger the Great One. I don't think he sounds like that at all, but that's what he sounds like now. This character just feels stupid. There was no reason to add him. Like, even kids aren't going to find that funny. So I don't really know what the point of that was. And then that's not to mention like Lizzo Firespitter and the whole fire elves being poets or playwrights or whatever. They're not playwrights. They're the people who act in plays. They're actors. That's what they're called. Basically, it just feels weird. And then my final major problem is that it feels like it cheapens the plot a lot. Like, the plot used to be serious, but fun, right? And that, I think, accurately describes a lot of Arc 1 and Arc 2. Like, it's serious, but fun. Arc 3 gets a little bit more fun, a little bit less serious, but I think it's still serious, which is good. It really feels like they just completely did away with that. Like, for example, and one of the biggest problems I have with it is like the random quests that have been thrown in that make no sense thematically or story-wise. Like Lord Nightshade, right? It's supposed to be the climactic battle, the ending of Wizard City. And for some reason, they added another quest afterwards from a random, like, Velma Scooby-Doo ass looking character that is like, hey, defeat field guards for me. And it's like, why? And if you were gonna do this, why didn't you do this before the battle with Lord Nightshade so that it's still the climactic finale? No, it's afterwards, which makes no sense at all. Like literally 0 cents. And it's so frustrating every time I see it. I'm like, why? Why would they do this? It makes no sense. Anyways, I'm sorry. I went on a Wizard City rant. I could make an entire video about that, honestly. But I'm going to put it in the C tier. I know that it sounded like I was really pissed off about that. And I was. I didn't even mention the sexism part with them switching Arter and Susie's roles. In my opinion, it's not horrible. It's just there's a lot of problems that they added with the changes that make no sense. And it really felt like they changed it just because they wanted to be like, hey, we changed Wizard City, go play through the game again. The only reason why it's C and not like D tier, in my opinion, is that Colossus Boulevard and Triton Underwater are still really fun, in my opinion. Like I did Triton Underwater a few days ago, and it was actually really fun. Pleasant experience, and it reminded me a lot of Old Wizard City. So yeah, I'll give it a C tier. I didn't mean to take this long on just Wizard City. Let's kind of storm through the rest of Arc 1 real quick, and hopefully this video doesn't end up being like 30 minutes long. Next up, we have Krokotopia, and as a kid, Krokotopia used to be far and above my favorite world in Wizard 101. The reason for that was pure nostalgia. I remember as a kid, I used to go into the Chamber of Fire in the Great Pyramid and go all the way up the top of the stairs and kind of circle around to where that giant lift thing was, and just sit there for hours listening to the music. I don't know why, but as a kid, it was the most entertaining thing in the world for me, and I loved it. Nowadays, I can't really do that, and Krokotopia has some problems that I have to admit. First off, it looks ugly as hell. It's probably the ugliest Wizard 101 world besides maybe Dragonspyre, if we're being completely honest. 2, the questline's pretty boring, and despite only being 60 quests long, it feels longer, especially during the Krokosphinx. The Krokosphinx feels like a slog. It feels like it takes like 3 hours to do, despite the fact you can do it in like 40 minutes. And finally, another big problem I have with it is the story doesn't feel nearly as climactic as other worlds. Like other worlds are related to Malastare in Arc 1, right? Like Malastare had a direct impact, or you see him or he was there. My point is the overarching plot of Arc 1, Krokotopia doesn't feel nearly as impactful in. So I'm going to put it in D tier. Krokotopia is still very nostalgic for me, but it's not as much as it used to be. And the fact that they flood my backpack with the Krokotopian gear makes me want to commit Abracadabra. So, you know, it could even go in F tier for that, but I'm not going to because I still hold a little bit of love for it. Next up, we have Marleybone. And I have always held the controversial opinion, I don't know how it's controversial, but it is, that Marleybone is an S tier world. Marleybone is so fun. It's short, it's sweet, the vibes are immaculate, the story beats are really fun, and it's just overall, in my opinion, the best Arc 1 world. Now, some people don't like it. I have no idea why, but they don't. In my opinion, Marleybone is just nice. You can really beat it in like an hour and a half if you try, 2 hours, which puts it on the shorter side, but I think that that actually lends very well to it. Like, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's there, it's fun while it's there, and then it's over. It also has one of the most iconic dungeons in Wizard 101, at least for a long time, which was Big Ben, because Big Ben was kind of a noob killer back in the day because of how many floors it had, and the final battle, which had like 2 bosses, 2400 health and 1200 health, 1600 maybe, if I'm remembering correctly. It was a little bit difficult back in 2009 anyway. It's aged like wine. Over time, the more I do it, the more I'm like, yeah, Marleybone is a really good world. Next up, we have Mooshu. And Mooshu, for me, it used to be one of my favorite worlds back in the day, but I will say a lot of people don't like it, and I can see where they're coming from. There is a lot of walking in Mooshu, and that really doesn't lend well to it, especially when Mooshu is pretty darn ugly. The greens are just so bright and like not in a good way. Like the saturation's too much on the greens. And then the 2D bamboo on the side of every street is also ugly. If the teleporters were more well placed, or if people used marks more, I think this world would be liked a lot better than it currently is. In my opinion, it's still a B tier world. I think it's still good story wise and it's fun. I like the 3 Onis and 4 Onis. I forgot about the Jade Oni. And overall, the characters are quite nice. As a kid, I used to love this world. Again, it used to be S tier. I probably ranked it S tier in at least one of my world tier lists, but it does have a few problems that nowadays I can kind of take a step back and recognize. Like it's not perfect. I will say, I don't know how many of you have played Pirate 101, but if Mooshu in this game, in Wizard 101, had the graphics of Pirate 101 Mooshu, I think it would be an A or an S tier world, because man, Mooshu is beautiful in Pirate 101. And if they could somehow redo Mooshu, but in that style, I think it would be a lot more well-liked than it is. Next up, and the finale of Arc 1, we have Dragonspyre. Now, I'm going to come out and say it. Dragonspyre has some problems. First off, it is long. It is like 106 quests long, which isn't that long compared to later worlds, but it feels long. There's a lot of tower dungeons. It's a lot of very samey battles. The streets don't feel that interesting, in my opinion, besides a few standouts. And the biggest problem for me is, goddamn, is Dragonspyre ugly. I think Dragonspyre is probably the ugliest world in this game, like next to Krokotopia. The lava looks horrible, the rocks look horrible, and this, in my opinion, needs a world redo, like a graphics update, more than any other world in this game. I'll still put it in a B. The reason for that being, I think the story is very good, and the streets that are good and that I like, I very much like. I think Dragonspyre has some of the most memorable streets in this game, but it also has some of the worst streets in this game. It could go up or down a tier depending on how I'm feeling, but I will say, whenever I'm questing up a new wizard, I almost never want to go back to Dragonspyre, which I think is a problem, right, when it comes to a world. Next up, we have Grizzleheim. Now, this includes Wintertusk, but I am going to quickly talk about the two separate worlds, because in my opinion, lumping in Grizzleheim with Wintertusk is very problematic because they are completely different worlds and one is a lot better than the other one. As someone who just did Grizzleheim again like a week ago, dear God, it's a horrible world. I would probably put Grizzleheim down in D tier. It's long, it's boring, it doesn't give XP, it's obscenely difficult for how little XP it gives, and it's just overall, like, there's almost no point in doing Grizzleheim if it weren't for the fact that Wintertusk is one of the best worlds in this game. It gives a lot of XP for the level, and while it is hard, it is fun overall, I would say. So if I could split it into two, I think Wintertusk would be S, and Grizzleheim would be like D or F. So I think that just means I put it in B tier on average. I know there's already 3 in B tier, but I think that that's just how I would do it. Next up, we have Celestia, and I'm gonna come out with my first probably truly controversial opinion in this video, besides maybe Marleybone. I know that one's controversial, but this is my first controversial opinion. I like Celestia. Back in the day, people hated Celestia, and that's probably still the common consensus nowadays. A lot of people don't really like Celestia, but I'm gonna come out and say it, I actually very much enjoy it. The last 3 or 4 times I've done Celestia, every time I've had a lot of fun. The enemies aren't obscenely challenging for your level. The vibes of the world are immaculate, and despite some streets being longer than others, I'd say overall Celestia isn't that long of a world. You can get it done in like 5, maybe 6 hours if you try hard enough. I'm gonna throw an A tier, mainly because I want to be controversial. My opinion of it's probably more along the lines of B tier, but I'm gonna be honest, in terms of like looking at these worlds, I do enjoy doing Celestia more than Mooshu, Dragonspyre, or Grizzleheim. So I don't know, that's my opinion. I will say, if Crustacean Empire didn't exist as a street, I might even think this is an S tier world. Crustacean Empire in of itself takes about 50 to 60 minutes to do. That's like with a max level helping you. It's just that long in terms of walking. Like the teleporters are in horrible locations, which makes it take that much longer, and it is probably one of the biggest streets in Wizard101, like biggest in terms of width. But you know what, enough of that. That's going to be my controversial take for the video. I think Celestia is a good world, and I don't care if you disagree. Next up, we have Wysteria, and I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I'm also going to put this in A tier. I think Wysteria is very fun. It's very short, but I think it's fun for what it is. It's just a blatant ripoff of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. They decided to make a tournament where a bunch of schools come together and basically fight each other gladiator style, which that's not from Harry Potter, but you fight each other gladiator style until one person remains. Then whoever wins gets the Spiral Cup. And obviously, since you're the wizard, you get dragged into a bunch of problems that the adults should probably figure out instead of a random kid that has been kidnapped from their homeworld and forced to learn magic. I think that's besides the point. I think overall it's fun. It has some challenging fights with Chester Drawers, at least at level 25. It's a pretty challenging fight. And it has Belladonna Crisp. So what more is there to love, honestly? I wouldn't put it in S tier just because it's not that good of a world, but it is good. Next up, we have Zafaria, and Zafaria, as much as it pains me to say it, I think it's a C tier world. I love Zafaria in terms of the vibes, and a lot of the streets I think are very good. But the problem is with Zafaria is Drum Jungle and Elephant Graveyard are like half of the world, and they're two of the most boring streets in this game, or the worst streets in this game, if I'm to go even further. I will say, like, if you took those streets out, I think my opinion of Zafaria would be like A tier, but instead it's C tier. It doesn't have too much going for it beyond that. In terms of stories, I think it's one of the more forgettable stories in Wizard101, which is a shame just because I think the visuals and the music in this world are some of my favorites in the entire game. So as much as it pains me, I'm going to put it at C tier. Next up is Avalon, and Avalon has always sat in S tier for me for the longest time. But I think my opinion of Avalon has I've finally broken out of the Avalon is good mindset that I've been in for the longest time. I'm going to put Avalon at the top of B tier. I think that it fits in with these worlds for me, but it's better than the rest of B tier, but it's not as good as the worlds I'd put in A tier. I think Avalon has a few major problems. First off, every single time I want to do it, I want to do it less than the time that I did it previous, if that makes sense. Every single time I do it, I like it a little bit less. On top of that, it is very long and has some very painful streets. The Weird and Dundara feel very slow, and then that's not even to mention the kind of rush of streets you do at the end, like the deepest waters or deepest lake, whatever, outer yard. That whole area, it just feels a little awkward. And then my biggest problem with it, and I have mentioned this so many times in the past, but dear God, don't make a weapon called the Sword of Kings that they mention like 50 times throughout the story is supposed to be one of the strongest weapons of all time, and make it something that gives like 2 pierce and 40 critical. I don't know. Maybe it's just floating an idea around. Maybe make it like a weapon that has damage or something nowadays. I know back in the day it didn't used to be that bad, but dear God, they've updated other weapons in the game. Why can't they do that? I don't know. Anyways, just floating an idea. It's not like I've made that video in the past, like why the Sword of Kings is stupid and bad. I just think it cheapens Avalon a little bit, and I think I'm going to put it in a B tier. Next up, we have Azteca, and you know where it goes. It goes in F tier. Azteca is so long. There's so much backtracking. The bosses are obscenely difficult because they are dual school without telling you that they're dual school, because that didn't exist back when Azteca came out. It didn't exist until Arc 3 Empyrea, I think. The only real consolation of Azteca, if I'm being honest, is the fact that it gets blown up in the end. Realistically, it makes the story feel a lot better. It's cathartic that it gets blown up in the end. I've mentioned how to fix Azteca in the past, and I'm not going to go that much into it in this video, but I will say there is a section of Azteca. It's after Salt Meadow Swamp and before Zoltandok, and the entire point of it is you going to Zoltandok. It's you getting that boat, and it is about 40 to 50 quests long. If they removed this one section, I think Azteca would go from like F tier to like maybe C tier for a lot of people, because that section feels so long. Every time you do Azteca, that section, in my opinion, is like the worst. It's so long. Obviously, that's not going to fix Azteca, but if they removed it or even cut it down, I think it would at least improve it marginally. Next up, we have Aquila, and Aquila for me, it's like A tier just purely based on vibes. Problem with Aquila is that there's not really a big reason to do Aquila beyond Mount Olympus. Skyrim Hast is obviously good and Zeus gear is good, but like Atlantia gear, you're never gonna want Atlantia gear. Atlantia gear is actually dog ass. It's like D tier gear, maybe even F tier. And then also Tartarus is, in my opinion, not a fun dungeon. And also the fact that Hades gear isn't that good either, because Darkmoor is not even that long after it. 10 levels doesn't take you that long to get, and it's just 100 times better. But I know you're like, okay, Noah, then why'd you put it in A tier? Aquila is very fun. I think that in terms of a world, it's on the shorter side, and it's just 3 dungeons, but those 3 dungeons are very memorable and honestly pretty fun. Like the Zeus section alone could be an S tier. So I'm going to put it in A tier. I think that's fair. It could go into B tier if I'm being honest, but I just think the ancient Greek kind of vibe is fun. So I'm going to put it in A tier. Next up, we have Khrysalis, and Khrysalis for me is like a C tier world. I think Khrysalis has a problem where it is obscenely long, being the longest world of this game at 277 quests, if I'm remembering correctly. It takes probably 30 to 40 hours of gameplay to get through if you aren't getting boosted through it. And dear God, Khrysalis Part 1 feels like a slog. If this was just Khrysalis Part 2, I think it would be an A tier, but Khrysalis Part 1, it's agonizing to get through every time you get through it. I think C tier is even being generous. A lot of people would probably put it in a D tier. I put it in a C tier just because I think that it's at least a fine world, and it has some streets that I do think are genuinely good, like Sardonyx. Even the Hive, I think, are at least decent. And then it sets up Old Cod very well. Next up is the 4 dungeons. And the 4 dungeons is hard because if I'm being honest, Kemalung Village is kind of like incredibly mid. There's no reason to do it. It gives a little bit of XP and the gear is pretty bad. The only reason why you maybe would do it is that as a balance, I think there's an amulet that gives you Feint, which is really good since you can Feint stack at level like 20. But otherwise, no reason. Barkingham Palace is very fun, but the gear kind of is mid, if I'm being honest. Like, it's only slightly better than Zeus gear. Zigazag is all right, and obviously a lot of people know it. I think it's the hat and the robe are better than Waterworks, which is good, but it is pretty difficult, and the drop rate of Zigazag is so low that it's like, eh. I don't know if you do it. And then obviously Darkmoor it's Darkmoor. Everyone knows Darkmoor. The vibes are immaculate. It's kind of a fun dungeon nowadays. It wasn't back in the day, but nowadays it's kind of fun. And the gear it drops are obviously incredibly good. The robe is used from level 100 all the way up to like level 150. Kind of laying it down there, I'd say like Kemalung Village is like a D. Barkingham is like a B. Zigazag is also like a B, and then Darkmoor is like an A. So I guess overall I'd put the 4 dungeons in B tier then, if I just kind of even it out. I think that's fair. Next up is Polaris, and let's be honest, Polaris is the best world. Polaris in Wizard101 is just amazing. They did kind of a reset, which I think was very much needed at this point in the game. Bosses went from like 25,000 health to like 8,000 health, and with like some stronger cheats and spells, which I think was very much needed. It also introduced the Arcanum. It went into the Rat. I don't know. I think this world in Wizard101, it's simply the best. The vibes are amazing. The story is amazing. It's not too long. It's just everything you could ask for a world in Wizard101, if I'm being honest. So I'm going to put it in S tier. It's probably, for me, it's above Marleybone. Next up is Mirage. And I think Mirage is a very underrated world in Wizard101. I think Mirage is in my top 5, and it's very solid. The vibes are amazing. The music is amazing, and I don't think it's too long. I think it's good. It's not as good as, I would say, Polaris or Marleybone for me, but I would definitely put it above the rest of these worlds in A tier. Like, it's not an S tier world in my opinion, but it's almost an S tier world. It's very, very close. Next up is Empyrea, and I think Empyrea, for me, Empyrea Part 1 is like very not fun. I would put it in like D or F, but Empyrea Part 2 is actually on the funner side. I would even put it in like A tier. I think the story of Empyrea, it's very long, but Part 1 kind of just falls a little flat. It feels longer than Part 2 for sure. It feels less fun than Part 2. I think that rating Empyrea low because of it would be a disservice to it. Part 2 is very fun. And then that's not even to mention the characters. Like, the Bat is very fun. The climactic finale between Grandfather Spider and Grandmother Raven, which I think was really fun. It was a nice twist on the fact that, like, Grandfather Spider wasn't even really the villain in the end. I mean, he was, but it was Grandmother Raven that was kind of being a little bit of an asshole. This wraps up Mallory. I think that that's my overall opinion of it. I think I'm also going to put it into C tier. I think that that's fair. It could go into B tier, but like looking at it, I would probably put it on the same tier of worlds as the rest of C tier for me. Next up, we have the Catacombs, and I'm gonna throw this into F tier. I don't like the Catacombs. There isn't a single part of the Catacombs I like. It's a bunch of incredibly difficult bosses that don't even have fun cheats to go over. I think I've gotten close to finishing the Catacombs once on one wizard. Like, I got up to the final fight. I don't think I ever did the Devourer, but I really didn't feel like it. All the bosses are just challenging and not in an engaging way, and the story itself isn't that interesting either. Nowadays, there isn't even really a reason to do the Catacombs because getting Dragoon gear is entirely pointless when in 10 to 20 levels, you're going to be replacing that with Merciless or something. And let me tell you, in the time it takes you to farm Dragoon gear, you can very easily get from level 130 to 150. Like, unless it's double reagents, it's going to take you longer than it would take to gain those 20 levels. Next up, we have Karamelle, and I'm coming in with my second hottest take of this video. Karamelle, in my opinion, has always been one of my favorite worlds in Wizard101. Since it came out, I think it's really fun. It disguises an incredibly dark and kind of serious story in happy fun time, right? I think a lot of people didn't like back in the day how childish it seemed, because already people weren't liking how arc 3 kind of took a more childish direction compared to the last arc, and Karamelle seems to like be the nail in the coffin for a lot of people. I think you're not looking at it hard enough. I think the story of Karamelle's really fun. It deals with horrors of capitalism, which I don't think would be something I would ever say about Wizard101, but it is something I say about Wizard101. I think the mystery of the old one's really fun and design. We don't know his design yet, but I think that in terms of arc 4, it started out really strong, and I've wanted to do Karamelle again for a very long time, but unfortunately all of my wizards are past Karamelle or are very much before Karamelle. But I will do it again someday. I've done it like 6 times. I want to do it a 7th. I think this world's really good. Let me know what you think. I know a lot of people will probably disagree. I think it's one of the best worlds in Wizard101. Next up, we have Lemuria, and this is the main reason why I made this list. What was I doing? I'm putting this in a D tier. I don't know why I put it in A tier. This world is overall pretty much horrible. The only redeeming qualities in my opinion are like the night forest and heap. Every other street is just agonizing to go through. They're not fun. A lot of the hero characters, quote unquote, aren't really that interesting. I don't even remember all of them. The only one I really remember is like Mandar, because he has the Arnold Schwarzenegger voice, which I think is fun. But I don't know. It's just a whatever world. I know a lot of people back in the day had a problem with how it ended, with the heroes kind of quote unquote betraying you, but that's not even a problem. If you think that the heroes betrayed you at the end, you're stupid and you have no brain. So I think that that's a fair place for it. Every street in this world, if I had to go back and do it, which I do because I have wizards that are in Lemuria, I personally wouldn't want to. If there was a world that I would use a world skipping elixir on, it would probably be Lemuria, if I'm being honest. The only reason why it's not in F tier is just because of those 2 streets I mentioned in the past. Next up, we have Novus. And Novus, when it first came out, I really liked it, but I think that was recency bias. Like, I think that because it had just come out, I really liked it. I think I ranked it A tier or maybe even S tier in the last video. I think nowadays it's a B tier. It's interesting. It was definitely a different take for a world, and I think that that's cool. And design overall as a character was very interesting in this world. Like, I think in terms of compelling characters, design is one of the most compelling characters they've written in Wizard101. So I'm going to put it at B tier. I think that that's fair. The only thing I would say that's keeping it from like an S tier is that last fight was horrible. I know that they fixed it and they made it a little bit better, but back in the day it was legitimately horrible. Also, the what is it, Puerto Nuevo, that street I think is very painful, so I'm gonna put it in B. Finally, we have Wallaru, the last world that I'm gonna rank, and unfortunately I think I'm also gonna put that in the B tier. I think that Wallaru is decent in terms of a world, but if I'm being honest, it has a lot holding it back. Like, for example, the Urk bosses are very painful, basically borderline CBT, but like a lot of the streets in my opinion are just like I wouldn't rank them that strongly. Also, on top of that, I think in terms of an arc finale world, it's definitely the weakest. Like, if we're comparing it to Khrysalis, Dragonspyre, Empyrea, and then itself, it's the weakest of those worlds. And I know that that's ironic to say, given that it's a B tier and Khrysalis and Empyrea are a C tier. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm putting it in a C tier. That was, my brain caught up with itself. I think it's a C tier, and I think it's below those other 2. Like, it's the weakest of the last worlds. I think there's more to like about it than there is like Empyrea Part 1 or Khrysalis Part 1. Like, it's better than those 2 parts, Empyrea Part 1 and Khrysalis Part 1, but it's not as good as Khrysalis Part 2 and Empyrea Part 2, if that makes sense. So I think that's a fair place to rank it. And looking at the time, dear God, I've been recording for 39 minutes, but this is my list. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Again, make sure to like and subscribe, hit that join button. I think that this is better than my other one. The only one I would see being very controversial would be like Celestia, which is what I aim for, because I think that that's funny and I think people might get mad about it, and that makes me cackle with glee. But that's it for today. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.